Hey there, I'm Ryan Boehme, and this is Curry Boehme, and you're tuning into So You Want to Teach Percussion. This video series is designed particularly for my current Percussion Methods students. Since they aren't able to have a typical Percussion Methods experience due to the current global pandemic, these videos are designed to give them a foundation of the technique outside of class time so that we have more time to play when we're together. But I also hope this video series can be helpful to any music educators out there. In this video, we're going to continue talking about snare drum rudiments. If you haven't seen part 1, click the link right up here. In that video, you're going to learn about single stroke roll rudiments, diddle rudiments, and flam rudiments. We've covered a few categories of rudiments now, and we even got to know a new articulation. In this video, we're going to learn about a few other articulations that your students are going to see all the time on all percussion instruments. I'm talking about multiple bounce roll rudiments, double stroke open roll rudiments, and drag rudiments. So grab your weapons of mass percussion and get ready because we're gonna break some rules today. Drum roll, please.
What kind of drum roll, Mr. Boehme?
Aha! Great question, generic percussion student. Percussionists have to know different kinds of drum rolls. So when we hear drum roll, we're thinking of a bunch of different sounds. Or we're probably thinking about how cool it would be to stack one drumstick on top of another drumstick. We're going to talk about different kinds of drum rolls today, and we're going to start with the multiple bounce roll. The multiple bounce roll, or buzz roll, is usually denoted by a little Z on the note, or occasionally 3 or more tremolos. To play these rolls, we're going to have to break a few rules, starting with our relaxed fulcrum. A relaxed fulcrum is really nice when we want to play a single note. But if you squeeze your fulcrum really tight and try to play a single note, you'll notice there's that little buzz sound, and our stick doesn't want to rebound like it used to. Talk about a bad. If you try a few more times, relaxing your fulcrum a little more each time, you should notice a longer buzz sound each time. Okay, now let's break another rule. You know how we've been using our wrists a lot up until now? Well, we're going to change that for buzz rolls. We want to strive for consistent volume and duration of each of our buzz strokes. To make that happen, we need to change the motion of our stick. When we use our wrist, the beat of the stick moves in this kind of arc motion, but if we move our stick instead in a more up and down motion, it's going to help us have a more consistent buzz quality from start to finish. To make this happen, we're going to need to keep the wrist locked and engage the forearm by bending from the elbow. Now, we have an easier time making the beginning of the buzz match the quality of the rest of the buzz. And here, you can see me doing just that. For rudiment number 4, the multiple bounce roll, I'm basically playing a single stroke roll, but I'm adding a buzz stroke to each hand. The goal here is to have each buzz stroke connect to the next buzz stroke, so that the roll sounds like one long, consistent buzz. Your students aren't going to grasp this overnight. A beginner's buzz roll might sound a little more like this. The first thing to notice here is that my buzzes aren't connecting from stroke to stroke. That's because the buzz quality of my right hand doesn't match the buzz quality of my left hand. So let's say I practice matching my right hand and my left hand buzz quality. Now my roll sounds like this. The roll's more connected, sure, but you can easily hear where each hand starts. It's not one smooth buzz from start to finish. So now, when I practice my buzz strokes on each hand, I can listen to the attack of each buzz, making sure I'm not accenting the front of any buzz stroke. Another way to develop your multiple bounce roll is to practice rudiment number 5, the triple stroke roll. This rudiment has a few different applications. In this first clip, you can see I'm using my wrists and a slightly squeezed fulcrum, moving the stick in more of an arc-like motion. Then I can add a little bit of back fingers to help keep the rhythm steady. But if I instead lock the wrist and engage the forearm to make the stick move more up and down, I can rely a little more on fulcrum pressure to squeeze out the triple stroke, rather than stroking it out like before. Now, check out this multiple bounce roll. It sounds a little more open, a little less buzzy than the one I played before. If we watch in slow motion, you'll see why. So not only am I playing a multiple bounce roll, but I'm also playing a fast triple stroke roll. At a certain speed, it's hard for the ear to distinguish the difference between the two. So if your students are having issues with buzz rolls, just have them practice triple stroke rolls. It'll be a little more forgiving for your beginners, and it'll give them something to relate the multiple bounce roll to, and help them realize it's not as hard as they think it is. Now we're going to talk about double stroke open roll rudiments. In part 1, we talked about diddles, or double strokes. That just means one hand is playing 2 strokes. We're going to see the same thing with double stroke rolls. These are denoted with 1 or 2 tremolo markings. And on the Rudiment Breakdown guide, linked in the description, you'll see that I marked each double stroke as either RR or LL. Just like a triple stroke roll, there are a few different applications for rudiment number 6, double stroke open roll. But the goal with these is always clear articulation. That's why it's called an open roll. We want the audience to hear a little bit of space between each individual note. More of a digga 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 than a buzz. And similarly to the other rolls we've mentioned so far, this is more of a concept than a strict rudiment. Double stroke rolls can last longer or shorter, and your students are going to see them in a variety of rhythmic contexts. Before we get any deeper, we need to talk about velocity. Velocity is a fancy physics term that just means distance over time, or speed. Whenever we refer to velocity in percussion, we're talking about the speed of the stick. If I play a note with low velocity, the stick doesn't have a lot of downward momentum, and my pad is going to reciprocate that and give me a slow rebound. But if I play it with high velocity, my stick has way more downward speed, and the rebound is going to reflect that. So why do you need to know all that? It's simple. To play a double stroke, the stick has to first play the first stroke, rebound, then play the second stroke. You're going to want more velocity or more speed in the stick so that it can be ready for that second stroke faster. If I play double strokes with slow sticks, you'll notice that the first stroke is loud and the second stroke is soft. That's because my stick isn't making it back up to playing position before the second note, so the second note is going to sound softer. Our goal with double stroke rolls is for each note to have the exact same sound quality. You can see all of that in action here. I'm using the wrists to initiate the first stroke on each hand, and then I can use my back fingers to assist with the second stroke. I can also throw in a little bit of forearm here, but we don't want to use too much forearm for slower double stroke rolls. Focusing more on the wrist and fingers is going to help keep the volume of every single note consistent for slow rolls like this one. But if the roll is too fast for me to use my wrist and fingers, then I can switch the stick motion to up and down, locking the wrist, engaging the forearm, and focusing more on my fulcrum, kind of like we did with multiple bounce rolls and fast triple stroke rolls. Since the diddle speed's faster here, we're going to want to stay closer to the drum head, which means it's going to be a little easier to match the volume of each stroke. But you still want to focus on high velocity, since there's even less time now for the stick to rebound before the second note. So now I'll play a fast double stroke open roll. Here I'm using a lot more fulcrum pressure and forearm, and like I said, keep the height low for this technique. If you want to play fast double stroke rolls at a louder volume, you're going to have to incorporate the wrist and back fingers so that you can still make each stroke sound the same. So there's 9 more rudiments in this category, but they all incorporate that same double stroke roll concept. They're just stricter, more contextual applications of the double stroke roll. These rudiments are named by the amount of notes they contain. For instance, rudiment number 7, the 5-stroke roll. Again, 5 means that there's 5 notes in the rudiment, not that you're playing 5 notes on one hand. I'm going to talk about all the odd number rolls first. These rolls include the number of total notes in the double strokes, plus 1 note for the release. I'll show you what I mean. The 5-stroke roll has 2 double strokes, which adds up to 4 notes. Then we add the release note to that to get 5 notes. Rudiment number 9, the 7-stroke roll, has 3 double strokes plus 1 release note, totaling 7 notes. The same thing applies to the 9-stroke roll, the 11-stroke roll, the 13-stroke roll, the 15-stroke roll, and the 17-stroke roll. And with each of these rudiments, you're just applying that same double stroke concept we already covered. Some of these rudiments are going to alternate starting hands when you repeat them, but others are going to repeat on the same hand each time. And then there's the 2 even numbered rolls, the 6-stroke roll and the 10-stroke roll. Ironically, these rolls are actually kind of odd.
Wow, Mr. Boehme, you're really on a roll with these puns.
You know what? That's pretty good. Wish I thought of that one. Anyway, they're strange because they don't look quite like our other rolls. The 6-stroke roll starts and ends with an accented single stroke, and the 10-stroke roll ends with 2 accented single strokes. But they both start on the same hand when you repeat them, and the double stroke concept is still exactly the same. So as long as you've got the double stroke concept down, you can play all 10 of these double stroke open roll rudiments no problem. Finally, we're going to talk about drag rudiments. These are similar to flams, but now you're going to be playing 2 grace notes before the primary note instead of 1. And that means you're going to use, you guessed it, a double stroke. And just like we did with flams, if a drag's primary note is on the right hand, we're going to call it a right drag. Same idea for the left drag. I'll start with some repeating right drags. I'm playing accented drags in this first clip, but notice when I switch to unaccented drags, there's still a clear distinction between the unaccented primary note and the low grace notes. When I'm playing a double stroke grace note, I mostly think of fulcrum pressure and pretty much just dropping the stick bead on the drum head. It'll take a while to get the hang of the volume and the speed, but once you get the hang of it with each hand, you can practice alternating drags. Just like we saw with alternating flams, each hand has to play downstrokes and upstrokes. But now we also have tap strokes on the first grace note of each drag. Another handy drag rudiment is rudiment number 38, the single rhythmic cue. This is made up of a drag that leads into a triplet rhythm with an accented release. The starting hand is going to alternate when you play repeating rhythmic cues, so it's a good idea to practice drags on both hands.
But Mr. Boehme, how fast should my drags be?
This is a question your students are likely going to ask themselves. Or you may just notice it yourself when your student plays a drag and it sounds nothing like what you know a drag should sound like. I'm going to recommend a video by my good friend Justin Ball, who's actually been staring over my shoulder this whole time. In Finding Your Drag Bass, Justin goes in depth about drag considerations for solo snare drum repertoire, and every single concept he talks about there also applies to wind band literature and orchestral literature. I'll add a link in the description, and I'll link it right here in the video. I hope you feel more comfortable with multiple bounce roll rudiments, double stroke open roll rudiments, and drag rudiments after this video. Practice these rudiments really slow, and don't forget to check out my Rudiment Breakdown guide, link in the description, so that you and your students can get to practicing and dissecting all 40 rudiments. Speaking of which, we've talked about all the different rudiment categories now. We didn't touch on every single rudiment, but now you have all the tools you need to tackle any of the rudiments we didn't talk about. Just like other instrumentalists have to practice scales, we have to practice rudiments. They show up so often in band and orchestra and solo rep that we can't afford not to practice them.
But Mr. Bowman, practicing rudiments is kind of a drag.
Sorry, I had to do one more. And with that, I'm Ryan Boehme, and thanks again for tuning into So You Want to Teach Percussion.